I always laugh when people call this really spicy because it's not. Hated the book and was strangely attracted to it. I don't like to admit that I enjoyed it, but I did enjoy it. I did read the first 4 books. I will probably finish the series.
I know. And with the
Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name's Sam and today we're talking romance in varying levels of spice. So for those of you who don't know, I am a huge fantasy romance reader and I've recently been really into contemporary romance as well. So when you read new adult romance like I do, you end up having to think about smut in some way, shape, or form. And that ends up with this discussion of what is smut and what is spice versus erotica and where do you draw the lines between these, and it can be very confusing. And when you watch recommendation videos, it can be really confusing because what one person thinks is spicy, another person doesn't think is spicy at all. What one person says is like a level 2 on their spice rating, another person might say is a level 5, and it really depends entirely on the person that you're watching. So I'm going to try and break down the way I look at this for me so that when you watch future videos, you kind of have an idea of what I am thinking. But I recently saw this TikTok and I don't remember who it was by, I didn't save it, but she basically explained the differences between spice and smut and erotica so nicely. So I'm gonna kind of use her example. And basically she made like a Venn diagram and she put spice on one side, erotica on the other side, and then smut was in the middle. So to her, and to me really, spice is a book where you have mostly plot. It is like a plot-based book or a character-based book, but the plot is important, the plot matters, and then you just have a little extra something on the side. And then we have erotica, which is the exact opposite. So erotica is where the little something on the side is the main point, that is the book, and then you might have a little bit of plot, but honestly you could take out the plot and you would still have the majority of the book there. Smut is the happy medium. That's where the plot and the something else are equal, and that is my personal favorite type of romance. So what I have done is I have taken a bunch of romance books that I owned and I have broken them up into 5 levels. Technically 6 because I did start with level 0, which is nothing in it at all the way up to level 5. And if we're gonna break that down into spice versus smut versus erotica, I'm thinking levels like 1 to 2 would be spice, and then 3 to 4 would be smut. Level 5 would be borderline erotica. I really don't read erotica, it's not my thing. Maybe 2 books that I personally considered a bit too much on the spice scale for me, so I associate them with closer to erotica, but other people who read a lot of erotica might not. So we'll just I'll talk about that when we get there. But I've got level 0 all the way up to level 5. We're going to go through it. I'm going to give you examples. I'm going to tell you what books are in each category, and maybe you'll find a book at your preferred level that you will enjoy. Before we get into the actual books, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, go ahead and hit that now, and the little bell icon will notify you when I post. Currently, my posting schedule is going to be on Sundays and Wednesdays. Let's talk romance. All right, so we're going to start with level 0. So this is where there is no sexual content in the book at all. Nothing. It's completely YA, it's completely clean, totally fine for your grandmother to read, that kind of thing. First recommendation I have here is Magnolia. This is by Christy Cook and it is a really cute YA romance about, oh gosh, their names, Gemma and Ryder, and they were best friends as kids. It's kind of like a reverse Romeo and Juliet where their families are best friends and they now hate each other. But their families have this idea in their heads that they are going to get married and end up together, and they absolutely hate that idea. But when a storm comes through and Gemma's parents are out of town, Ryder comes to her rescue, and maybe they don't actually hate each other after all. Super cute, super clean, love this book. Next up is one of my personal favorite romances of all time, and that is Chasing McCree. This is by JC Isabella, and this follows Briar and Chase. And Briar is a cheerleader in Miami, and she comes from a very affluential family. And Chase is a cowboy from Montana who has recently been staying in Miami to visit his mom, but he is going back to Montana. He meets Briar in the middle of the night while riding a horse in a park in Miami, and they become friends, and eventually she decides to go back to Montana with him, and things kind of spiral from there. Super cute, very clean. This is one of my favorite This is my favorite young adult romance of all time. It is just so cute and so sweet. And while there is like absolutely a plot and the plot matters and the conflict is there, the romance is not part of the conflict, and I really appreciate that about this book. Next up, we have a level 1 on the spice rating scale. So level 1s are fade to black. So a lot of times these are still YA, but we do get the occasional new adult or adult romance that still has the fade to black situation. So this is where you know something has happened, but you don't actually read it on the page. So the first book I have for this is The Unhoneymooners. As far as I know, I went back and checked, and the only scene that I could find, and I'm pretty sure it's the only one, was fade to black. So I'm 99% sure on this one. But this follows our two main characters, Olive and Ethan, and they are the best man and the maid of honor in their siblings' wedding. So her sister and his brother are getting married, and everybody at the wedding gets food poisoning except for Olive and Ethan, but the bride and groom had already paid for this all-inclusive honeymoon to Hawaii, so they forced their siblings to go, even though Olive and Ethan hate each other, and they now have to pretend to be married on this getaway to Hawaii. Super cute, super fun, definitely like a rom-com. I enjoyed it. Next up, we have The Cheat Sheet. This is by Sarah Adams, and this follows our main characters, Bree and Nathan. And Nathan is an NFL player, and Bree is his childhood best friend. She is in love with him, but she doesn't think that he likes her as anything more than a friend. But they end up having to fake date for paparazzi reasons, and things kind of spiral from there. It was cute. It's very short. It's very clean. It's one of those, it's definitely like a new adult to adult romance, but it's very clean, and I was kind of surprised. I expected this to be higher on the spice rating, but if you like older romances, like you're kind of tired of YA but you still want something very clean, this is a very good option for you. Next up, we have My Life Next Door. This is by Huntley Fitzpatrick, and this follows our main characters, Samantha and Jace. And Samantha comes from a very small family. Her mom and her sister, her mom is, I think, a senator, and her mom is very like prim and proper and clean and feels like you need to be productive all the time, and everything has a place and all of that kind of stuff. And the Garretts next door are the absolute opposite. There's like 8 kids, everything is always chaotic and messy, and Samantha's mother can't stand them. But Samantha ends up meeting Jace, one of the brothers, and we get like the cutest little summer romance from there. It is so cute. I loved it. It was my favorite YA romance ever until I read J.C. McCree, which slightly won out, but this one is still a very good contender, and I cannot wait to reread this sometime this summer. Okay, so this is where things started to get a little bit complicated, because I was struggling with some books to place them at a solid 1 versus a solid 2, so I ended up creating a couple of half categories. So now we have 1.5. So this is where we have at least one scene, and it's not fade to black, but it's not very detailed either. And there's usually only one scene. I think in all of these there's one scene. It's not quite fade to black, but it's not quite overly detailed either, so I didn't think it was high enough to make a 2. So we're gonna go with that. First up, we have A Deal with the Elf King. This is by Elise Kova, and this follows Luella, who is a healer in a little community, except that every so often, I guess with each new generation, the Elf King from the world that borders their world comes to take a human bride, and the human bride that he takes is the only human with magic. Now, no human has been born with magic since the last queen was taken, so when he comes to Luella's community to take someone, things are a little bit different, and he ends up taking Luella with him because she has magic that she didn't know about. So then we get kind of an enemies to lovers, Beauty and the Beast vibes kind of thing going on here. It's very cute. I really liked it. This is a series, but each book is completely different. They don't follow the same characters. They're more like companion novels. The second book is absolutely a 0 or 1 on the spice scale, if you were wondering, but this one is more like a 1.5. Next up, we have The Bridge Kingdom. This follows our main character, Laura, and she has trained her whole life to be an assassin and to marry the king of the Bridge Kingdom in order to steal his throne, kill him, find out secrets, something to that effect. She's essentially a spy, and she is forced into this arranged marriage. she is forced into this arranged marriage where she is supposed to be acting as a spy for her country, but a lot of things happen from there. And I actually can't remember if the spice happens in book 1 or book 2. It is a duology, but it's very much a level 1.5. It was super fun. I really enjoyed it. And the covers are just so gorgeous. And the same with A Deal with the Elf King. They have these really pretty pictures underneath the cover, and these actually make out a map, which is really cool. Next up, we have The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I always laugh when people call this really spicy because there's one scene. It's slightly more than Fade to Black, but really nothing. But if you go into this after ACOTAR expecting the same level, you're not gonna get it. But I do believe that the spice happens in the second or third book, not in the first one, but I figured I would just roll with the first one for this video. But this follows our main character, Jude. And Jude was a child when she was like kidnapped. Her parents were murdered, and she and her 2 sisters were stolen away to the land of the Fae. And so that she's grown up in fairy. There's this fairy prince who hates her. He bullies her. It's also kind of like a bully romance. And she has this desire to like take over the world, basically. So we've got kind of a bully romance. It's a very political fantasy as well. I would definitely say this is more of a fantasy with a romance side plot, but we do get a tiny little bit of spice in there, so I thought I would throw it in. Next up, we hit a level 2. So this is where we have at least one decently detailed scene in the book. Sometimes there might be more than one scene and they're a little bit less detailed, or we might just have one that is really detailed. Not really detailed, but like not always super detailed, but you know what's happening, and it usually lasts like at least a couple of pages. So first up in this, we have A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This, I feel like I don't really need to talk about what it's about, but it is a super popular fantasy romance. I would put it at a level 2. There's really only one scene. It is fairly detailed, but not obnoxiously so. And yeah, I mean, y'all already know how much I love this series. I don't need to say that much about it. Along similar lines, I would also put House of Earth and Breath in this category of a level 2. This is also by Sarah J. Maas. It is the first book in her Crescent City series. And it is an adult high fantasy that follows Bryce, and she is investigating the murder of her best friend in a high fantasy setting. It's so cool. This is one of my favorite books I have ever read. I absolutely adore this book. And I'm absolutely dying for the next one, as I'm sure everybody else is. So if you are looking for another level 2 similar to ACOTAR kind of vibes, great contender. Next up, we have Bully. This is by Penelope Douglas, and it follows our main character, Tate. Her name is Tate, and she has had a best friend, and then they had a falling out, and suddenly he becomes her biggest bully. Absolutely hates her. She doesn't know why, and she's still strangely attracted to him despite the fact that she hates him now. So this was fun. I would say this is very much a level 2. You definitely get some stuff in there, but it's not that much. Fairly detailed, but not overly so. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 because I did have some issues with just some topics that were covered and how they were dealt with, but the actual story itself was kind of cute. I kind of felt the same way the main character did, in which I both hated the book and was strangely attracted to it. So I felt like a 3 was a happy medium. Alright, now that I think about this one, I feel like it could go in the 1.5 category. This is somewhere between a 1.5 and a 2 probably, but that is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This follows our main characters Poppy and Alex, and they were best friends. They went on a vacation together every single year, and then it's been a few years since their last vacation. Something happened on that last vacation and they stopped going. But now Poppy decides that they should go on one last vacation together, and things happen from there. It's super cute. It's a friends to lovers. I love it. I love Poppy in this book. She is such a fun character, and if you like rom-coms, like, this is a solid one. Next up, we have a level 2.5. So to me, this is basically a level 2, but the scenes are a little bit longer than the level 2. So I feel like most of these could be lumped in with level 2 if you want to be pretty strict about it, but I felt like some of the scenes were very long for what they were, but there's still not that much in it. First up, we have The Spanish Love Deception, and this is a level 2.5 because that scene is so long. Like, it literally goes on for like pages and pages and pages. I didn't think it was ever going to end. But the book itself is pretty long for romance. But this follows our main character, Catalina, and she needs a date to her sister's wedding in Spain, and she's been telling her family all about this American boyfriend that she doesn't have. So this coworker that she hates offers to go with her. She ends up accepting his offer, so we get some fake dating and some enemies to lovers, workplace to lovers. It was pretty good. Next up, we have The Love Hypothesis. Same thing here, super long scene. I would still categorize it as a level 2 as far as like actual content goes, but it goes on for so long. But this follows our main character, Olive, and she is a third-year PhD student, and she ends up, in a very roundabout way, she ends up fake dating one of her professors, not really her professor, but a professor in her program. And it kind of spirals from there. This is also very much like a Grumpy Sunshine. It was cute. I enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite romances this year. Next up, we have Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. I put this one in the 2.5 category because of the amount of smut in it. Like, there's a lot, but none of it was overly detailed. Like, there's multiple scenes, but none of them are like obnoxiously detailed, so I went with 2.5 with this one. But this follows our main character, Georgie, and she is a literal clown for a living, like at children's birthday parties. And we also have her brother's best friend, Travis, and he was a baseball player who got injured, and so he basically lost his career and he is not handling it well. And then this is another like fake dating situation that kind of happens, another paparazzi situation. It was cute. I enjoyed it. Solid read. Next up, we have level 3. So this is different from a level 2 in that there's usually more than one scene and they are fairly detailed, not necessarily like play-by-play detailed, but we know a lot of things that are happening and there's more than one time that it happens in the book. This is probably my favorite. I would say 3 to 4. 3 to 4 is probably my favorite as far as my ratings go. First up, we have House of Sky and Breath. This is the second book in the Crescent City series, so I talked about the first book and what that was about. I don't want to talk about the sequel and ruin it for anybody who hasn't read it yet, but this is a little bit higher on the spice scale. Super great read, and oh my goodness, that ending. Next up, we have Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Y'all know that this is my favorite book of all time, like ever. I would put this at a level 3 because of how many times things happen, but I love this book, and I do find that the series gets lower on the spice scale the further you go. I would say that book 1 is at a 3, and then they go down from there until we're sitting at like a solid 1.5 for most of the series. But I absolutely love this book. It is so good. I feel like I don't really need to talk about it all that much. Like, everybody knows what Outlander is. It's also a really great TV show. Next up, we have A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, so I don't really want to talk too much about this book, but it definitely goes up a little bit in the spice scale, and I love this book. This is my favorite book of that series. Next up, we have books 1 and 3 of Abby Glein's Sea Breeze series. So we have Breathe and While It Lasts. I would rate basically this whole series for what I've read of it at a level 3. I feel like it's a solid new adult read. The first book follows Sadie and Jax is like a slightly older than teenage rock star, and Sadie is one of the maids at his summer home, and they strike up a friendship and then a little bit more than a friendship. Super cute. Love that one. This follows some other characters from the original book, and we've got Eva and Cage, and Cage gets in some trouble, and in order to get out of that trouble, he is basically forced to go work on this farm where he starts to fall for the farmer's daughter. Also really liked this one. Next up, we have The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This follows Hannah and Garrett, and I just recently read this and I loved it. But Hannah is like a straight A student. She is also crushing on this football player in her philosophy class, I think. And Garrett is a hockey player who is currently failing philosophy and desperately wants Hannah to tutor him so that he can get his GPA up so he doesn't get kicked off the team. She agrees. He agrees to help her get this football player that she likes, and then he decides that he wants her for himself, so he's going to stop doing that. It's super cute. I absolutely loved this book. It was so good. I cannot wait to read the rest of the series. So excited. Alright, next up we have a level 4. So basically the difference between a level 4 and a level 5 is the amount of plot. So level 4 definitely has a lot of smut. Like that is a major factor in the story. It is there, it is detailed, it is multiple within the book. However, there is still a plot and the plot still matters a lot. Like you can't take the plot out of the book and still have anything there. I feel like to hit level 5, the plot is very secondary. So these books still have a really fantastic plot, but they also have that added smut. So first up I have From Blood and Ash, and I would really put more the second book on this list. The first one, not so much, but I figured I would just talk about the first one. This follows our main character Poppy, and she is a maiden in a world where that means she is basically kept away from society. She has to wear this white veil. Nobody can see her or really interact with her, but she gets this new guard named Hunt, and things kind of start to change from there. This is a series that I really love. I just love the plot of this series, and I know a lot of people are liking it less as the series goes on. I'm not finding that, and I think it is because it has such a good ratio of plot to smut. And some people are like, oh, well, the plot in the third book is like going downhill. Like there's a lot of added things that don't need to be there, but like the added things are what I'm enjoying. So personally, I still really like it, but I have not read the newest book yet. So we'll see if I change my mind. Next, I have A Court of Silver Flames, also by Sarah J. Maas. This is the fourth book in the ACOTAR series. And this follows a different sister, and it is definitely higher on the spice scale than her other books, but I loved it. This is such a good book. This follows, actually, no, just kidding. I'm not going to talk about that because if you haven't read the other books, it will ruin things. So just kidding, never mind. Alright, and then next up we have Enemies by Tijan. This is an enemies to lovers romance, but it's kind of like a childhood friends, two enemies, two lovers. We've got Stone and I actually don't know the girl's name and it's not on the back. So we have a girl and we have Stone, and Stone is a football player in, I think, Texas, and she is just moving to Texas to go to college there. They kind of run into each other, I don't remember how, and they're forced to spend some time together, but doesn't make it a secret that he hates her. She doesn't really know why, but things kind of start to spiral from there. Super cute, really liked it, and I would put this at a solid 4. Alright, and then level 5. This is what I would consider like the beginning of erotica. I feel like legit erotica is kind of like not on this scale, but this is what I would consider like borderline, where the plot is very much secondary and kind of not really there. I'm not a huge fan of these, so I'd only own one, and I can really only say that I've probably read maybe 2 or 3, but this is just not my thing. It's a little bit too much for me. I prefer the 3 to 4 and below scale. So the only book that I own that I would consider a 5 is Ice Planet Barbarians. This is by Ruby Dixon. I feel like a lot of people have heard about this book by now, but basically we have girls that have been kidnapped by aliens and they get dumped on this planet and they are rescued by different aliens and things happen from there. I will not be elaborating on that at this time, but I did enjoy it. I don't like to admit that I enjoyed it, but I did enjoy it. I did read the first 4 books. I will probably finish the series. But I don't generally like this amount of spice in a book. Another book that I would put in that category that I did read, but I don't own it, I don't really want to own it, was A Ruin of Roses. I don't remember who it's by, but this one was also a bit much for me. I did finish it, but barely. I only finished it because it was very short, but I strongly considered DNFing it. Just a bit much for me, but if you like that level of spice, you probably won't find a lot of that on my channel. But if you like the 3 to 4 range, that's where we're at. Alright, so that is my spice scale, and if you liked this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!